Hey there, curious minds. Welcome to our corner of history, where books hold more than just words. Today, we're going to uncover a hidden secret within one of the most famous works of all time. A secret that isn't a plot twist, but a weapon of incalculable power. What if I told you that 1001 Nights isn't just a collection of bedtime stories? What if it's actually the ultimate manual for one of the most brilliant and audacious psychological strategies ever executed in human history? A strategy that saved countless lives. Get ready, because we're about to discover how one woman, armed only with her voice and her wit, dismantled a king's tyranny and changed the course of an empire. This is the true story of Scheherazade and her incredible secret weapon, storytelling as therapy and as revolution. Before we dive in, I wanted to tell you a little something about the visuals you're seeing. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere. They won't always be literal, but rather a visual companion to let your imagination soar with me. I truly hope you enjoy it. To understand Scheherazade's genius, we first need to meet the monster she faced, Sultan Shahryar. Imagine a powerful man, a leader, betrayed in the most painful way by his wife. His world shattered, his trust utterly broken, and his heart filled with a poisonous darkness. Shahryar's wound festered, becoming a plague upon his kingdom. Blinded by grief and rage, he vowed revenge on all women. His decree was horrifying. Each day he would marry a virgin, and at dawn have her executed. The kingdom plunged into terror and despair. Night after night, blood ran. Fear was the only king. It's at this point, when all hope seemed lost, that our heroine emerged, Scheherazade, the Grand Vizier's daughter. But she was no trembling victim. She was a woman of exceptional intelligence and culture. Scheherazade had read thousands of books. She knew history, poetry, and philosophy. She understood human nature, its weaknesses, and most importantly, its potential cures. She saw what no one else did, that the king wasn't a monster by nature, but a man sick with pain. Then she conceived a plan, an incredibly risky one. She asked her father to offer her as the Sultan's next wife. Her father, horrified, refused. He knew it was a death sentence, but Scheherazade's resolve was unbreakable. She had a weapon no one knew about. That night, in the royal chambers, just as time was running out, Scheherazade asked the king for one last wish: to allow her to tell a story to her younger sister, Dunyazad, whom she had brought with her. The king, bored and intrigued, agreed, and in that moment, the secret weapon was deployed. Scheherazade didn't start with just any tale. She chose a fascinating story full of magic, adventure, and suspense. The king, who had only expected a boring anecdote, found himself utterly captivated by the narrative. His mind, for the first time in years, was distracted from his own pain and plunged into another world. And just as the story reached its most thrilling point, when the protagonist was in the gravest danger, Scheherazade stopped. The sun was rising. She looked at the king and told him that the continuation was even more astonishing, but he would have to wait until the next night to hear it. This was the core of her strategy, the technique we now call a cliffhanger in television. It's a brilliant psychological trick. Psychologists know it as the Zeigarnik effect, a principle stating that the human mind remembers incomplete tasks far better than completed ones. Scheherazade created an incomplete task in the king's mind, an open loop, an unanswered question. Throughout the entire day, Shahryar could think of nothing else. His need to know what happened next was stronger than his murderous impulse. For the first time, he postponed an execution. Night after night, she repeated the same strategy. She ended each story at the climax, leaving the king in a state of unbearable suspense. What began as one night turned into 10, then 100, and so on until it reached 1001. The king's curiosity kept both him and her alive. But Scheherazade's weapon was far more sophisticated than simply creating suspense. If it were just that, the king might have grown tired of it. The second level of her strategy was the content of the stories. They weren't randomly chosen tales, they were a carefully designed therapy. Scheherazade told him stories of wise and just kings who forgave their enemies and were rewarded. She narrated fables about the consequences of rage and hasty decisions. Each tale was a mirror, a lesson disguised as entertainment for the Sultan's wounded soul. In the stories, Shahryar saw his own demons reflected, but also the possibility of redemption. He learned about true love, loyalty, and forgiveness through the characters. Scheherazade was, quite literally, re-educating his moral compass, night after night, word by word. Consider the voyages of Sinbad the Sailor. They weren't just adventures. They were lessons in resilience, the ability to overcome adversity, and the importance of hope. Each of Sinbad's journeys was a step in the king's own healing journey, as he felt trapped in his personal storm. Or let's consider the stories of genies and magic, like Aladdin's. These stories reminded the king that forces greater than earthly power exist, that humility and cunning often triumph over brute force, and that wishes must be handled with care. Scheherazade also included tales of intelligent, brave, and loyal women. In this way, she directly counteracted the king's trauma. She subtly showed him that his experience with one unfaithful woman did not define all women. She was rebuilding his trust in half of humanity. Through these narratives, the king's world expanded. He, who had locked himself away in his own pain, now traveled to distant lands, met all sorts of people, and confronted complex moral dilemmas from the safety of his chamber. Empathy began to grow in his heart. Empathy was the key. By stepping into the shoes of the heroes and villains in the stories, Shahryar began to process his own trauma. Scheherazade was giving him the tools to understand himself and to heal. Art became the most powerful medicine. Thus, over almost 3 years, the king underwent a profound transformation. His bloodlust was replaced by a thirst for stories. His rage was replaced by curiosity and reflection. The tyrant was becoming a philosopher, guided by the invisible hand of his storyteller. The impact of this technique is so profound that we see it replicated throughout our modern culture. Every time you finish an episode of a series and need to watch the next one, you're feeling Scheherazade's power. She is the mother of modern suspense, of binge-watching. Great sagas in literature and cinema, from Harry Potter to Game of Thrones, use this very same structure. They introduce us to a world, make us fall in love with their characters, and leave us hanging at the end of each book or season, compelling us to come back for more. Even advertising and marketing have learned from Scheherazade. They create campaigns that tell a story in parts, generating anticipation and keeping the audience hooked, waiting for the next revelation. The art of incomplete narration is a tool of mass persuasion. But let's return to our original story, to the 1001st Night. After all this time, Scheherazade had finally finished her storytelling marathon. She stood before the king, accompanied by the 3 children she had borne him during those years. She was ready to accept her fate. This is the climax, the ultimate twist in the tale. The king looked at her, but no longer saw his next victim. He saw his savior, the mother of his children, the woman who had returned his soul to him. Shahryar announced he would not execute her. The stories had not only saved Scheherazade's life, they had healed his own. He named her his queen and ordered all the stories to be transcribed into golden books to serve as lessons for future generations. Scheherazade's secret weapon, storytelling, not only stopped a massacre, but created one of the most significant literary works in history. The true legacy of 1001 Nights isn't just its fantastic tales of genies and sailors. It's the demonstration of the power a good story holds to foster empathy, to heal the deepest wounds, and to transform an individual and even an entire society. Scheherazade taught us that storytelling is an act of power. It's the ability to shape perception, to guide thought, and to inspire change. Her strategy wasn't one of submission, but of unprecedented intellectual and emotional rebellion, a true masterpiece. Every story, no matter how small, has the potential to plant a seed in the listener's mind. A seed that can grow into an idea, a feeling of understanding, or even a personal revolution. That is the magic and power we all inherit from her. The story of King Shahryar is a reminder that unhealed pain can fester into cruelty. His isolation led him into a cycle of violence that was only broken when he was forced to connect with the experiences of others through the tales he heard. Scheherazade's genius was in understanding that she couldn't confront the king directly. A frontal attack would have only fueled his rage. Instead, she used an indirect approach, metaphor, and allegory so that the king himself would reach his own conclusions and find his path. The diversity of the tales was also key. Scheherazade offered the king an entire universe of possibilities. Stories of love, war, comedies, tragedies, poems. This variety prevented monotony and kept the king mentally agile, stimulating different parts of his psyche. Consider the narrative framework, a story within a story, sometimes on multiple levels. This technique, called mise en abîme, creates a hypnotic effect. It traps the listener in a labyrinth of narratives they don't want to escape, deepening the state of immersion and suggestion. Scheherazade herself becomes the protagonist of the most important story of all, the one not explicitly told, but unfolding night after night. It's the story of how intelligence and creativity can triumph over tyranny and brute force. The work also teaches us about the importance of memory and oral tradition. Before being written down, these tales were passed down by word of mouth, evolving and adapting. Scheherazade embodies that ancestral power of the spoken word to preserve culture. The concept of 1001 nights is symbolic. It's not a literal number. It signifies infinity, an uncountable quantity. It suggests that the process of healing and learning through stories is an endless journey, an inexhaustible source of wisdom and growth. The influence of this work extended far beyond the Islamic world. When it was translated into French by Antoine Galland in the 18th century, it caused immediate fascination in Europe. It sparked massive interest in Oriental culture and changed Western literature forever. Authors like Voltaire, Dickens, and even Borges were profoundly influenced by the narrative structure and boundless imagination of 1001 Nights. Scheherazade not only saved her people, but also gifted a new way of storytelling to the entire world. The fact that the heroine is a woman in a patriarchal society is profoundly revolutionary. Scheherazade used the tools at her disposal, intelligence and words, to subvert power and establish a new order based on wisdom and compassion. It's a feminist narrative far ahead of its time. It demonstrates that true power doesn't lie in physical strength, but in knowledge, strategy, and the ability to understand and manipulate human psychology for a greater good. It's the victory of mind over matter. The work is also a celebration of Islamic culture in its golden age. Through the stories, we travel to Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, cities that were vibrant centers of science, art, and philosophy. It's a window into a world of astonishing cultural richness. It's important to remember that the version we know today is a compilation of stories from diverse sources: Persian, Indian, Arab, and Egyptian, gathered over centuries. 1001 Nights is, in itself, a melting pot of cultures, unified by Scheherazade's narrative genius. So Scheherazade's plan works on a macro level. By weaving together stories from different cultures, she's teaching the king about the world's diversity, combating his narrow and xenophobic view born of trauma. She shows him that wisdom can come from anywhere. Next time you read a book or watch a movie, think of Scheherazade. Notice how the author plays with your curiosity, how they present moral dilemmas through the characters, and how, in the end, the story has changed you, even if just a little. It's an ancient art. The greatest secret of all is that we are all, to some extent, both Scheherazade and Shahryar. We tell stories to make sense of our world, to connect with others, and to heal our own wounds. And we listen to the stories of others to learn, grow, and feel less alone. Storytelling isn't a luxury, it's a fundamental human need. It's the software our civilization runs on, the code that allows us to cooperate, to dream, and to build a better future. Scheherazade simply elevated it into an art form and a weapon for justice. Think of it this way. The king was trapped in a loop of repetition, reliving his betrayal each day with a new victim. Scheherazade broke that loop by introducing novelty, imagination, and the possibility of different futures through her tales. The story's structure is, therefore, a form of behavioral therapy. It changed the king's behavior not through punishment, but through reward. The reward was the alleviation of his suspense, the satisfaction of a good ending, and the pleasure of intellectual companionship. A fascinating aspect is how Scheherazade managed the risk. Her life hung by a thread each dawn. This added a layer of tension to the meta-story itself. We weren't just worried about the fate of the characters in the tale, but about the storyteller herself, the real heroine. This duality makes the work incredibly immersive. We are Scheherazade's sister, listening with bated breath. We are the king falling under the spell, and we are Scheherazade herself, feeling the weight of every word she chooses, knowing that one wrong phrase could be her last. Orality is fundamental. Scheherazade didn't give the king a book. She spoke to him. The human voice has an intrinsic healing power. The rhythm, the tone, the cadence all contributed to calming the king's nervous system, pulling him from his constant state of alert and opening him to new ideas. The tales acted as a safe space for the king. Within fiction, he could explore dangerous emotions, like sadness, vulnerability, or even love, without the risk they would pose in the real world. It was a kind of emotional simulation guided by an expert therapist. It's also a lesson in patience. Shahryar's transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a long and gradual process. Scheherazade knew that deep wounds require time to heal, and her strategy was designed as a long-term treatment, not a quick fix. The ending is crucial. By forgiving Scheherazade and marrying her, the king not only saved her life, but completed his own healing. He embraced a new relationship based on trust and intellectual admiration, completely breaking the pattern of his original trauma. The order to write down the stories is the final act of his transformation. He transitions from a destroyer of lives to a preserver of culture. He recognizes that true power and immortality are not found in dominance over others, but in the creation of a legacy of wisdom. The irony is delicious. The king, who tried to silence women forever, is immortalized and redeemed thanks to the incessant voice of a woman. It's the ultimate proof that attempting to suppress stories and ideas is a losing battle. They always find a way to flourish. 1001 Nights reminds us that literature isn't just a mere pastime. It's a social technology, a tool that has allowed us to evolve, cooperate in large groups, and build complex civilizations. Stories are the glue that holds humanity together. Each tale Scheherazade shares is a miniature universe with its own rules, its heroes, and its lessons. By exposing the king to this multitude of worlds, she breaks the prison of his singular and obsessive perspective, teaching him that reality is always more complex than it seems. In many of the tales, wit triumphs over strength. Characters like Ali Baba or the slave girl Morgiana aren't the strongest, but they are the most cunning. This is a recurring message Scheherazade sends to the king again and again, validating her own strategy against him. Humor is also an important tool in Scheherazade's arsenal. Some stories are frankly comical, filled with clumsy characters and absurd situations. Laughter is a powerful medicine, capable of breaking tension and piercing through the king's armor of bitterness. In the end, the Sultan falls in love not just with the stories, but with the mind that creates them. He falls in love with Scheherazade's intelligence, resilience, and compassion. His love isn't born of physical beauty, but of a deep intellectual connection, a true meeting of minds. The story highlights the importance of knowledge. Scheherazade saves herself because she has studied, read, and accumulated wisdom. It's a passionate defense of education, especially the education of women, as the most effective tool for social change and justice. The act of serial storytelling, night after night, created a ritual. This ritual brought new structure and predictability to the king's life, which had previously been dominated by the chaos of his emotions. The routine of narration became an anchor of stability in his turbulent existence. The very structure of 1001 Nights, without a defined ending until the 1001st night, reflects the nature of life. There's always another story, another possibility, another day. Scheherazade teaches the king to live in the present with the promise of a future, instead of being anchored in the past. We could say that Scheherazade was history's first great narrative psychotherapist. She used principles that modern psychology wouldn't discover for centuries, demonstrating an intuitive and profound understanding of the human mind and its capacity to heal through language. This narrative challenges us to be better storytellers in our own lives, to choose the stories we tell about ourselves and others with care, knowing that words don't just describe reality, they have the power to create it. The deepest twist of this story is that by healing the king, Scheherazade also heals the kingdom. Her act of individual bravery has massive collective consequences. She restores justice, hope, and balance to a society that lived in terror of one man's whim. Her weapon, the story, wasn't a weapon of destruction, but of creation. She didn't tear down the tyrant, she rebuilt him. This is perhaps the most subversive and powerful lesson of all, that true revolution doesn't always consist of destroying the old, but of transforming its heart. Scheherazade's story is a beacon of hope. It tells us that even in the darkest of nights, facing the most absolute and cruel power, intelligence, creativity, and a good story can ignite a light that changes the world forever. The power of one voice. Scheherazade is therefore much more than a simple storyteller. She is a strategist, a psychologist, a revolutionary, and a heroine. Her story is an eternal testament to the power of words to heal, to educate, and ultimately to liberate. Scheherazade's survival is, in essence, the survival of culture itself. She personifies the human need to create meaning and order from chaos, using narrative as her fundamental tool to reinterpret and transform reality. The story's framework, with the constant danger of death, teaches us that storytelling is a serious business. It's not a game. The narratives we choose to live by and share have real consequences, for us and for those around us. The word is life or death. The collection of tales itself is a labyrinth. One tale leads to another. A character in one story tells another story, creating a reading experience that is deliberately disorienting and magical. We lose ourselves in the narrative, just as the king loses himself and forgets his vengeance. The fact that many stories don't have a clear moral is also part of the therapy. They compel the king and us to think, to interpret, to discuss. It doesn't give him easy answers, but instead involves him in the process of seeking wisdom, making him an active participant. Shahryar's journey is from the tyranny of the ego, locked away in his own wound, to liberation through empathy, connecting with the countless lives in the tales. Scheherazade gives him 1,000 lives so he can learn to live his own in a fuller and more just way. In conclusion, 1001 Nights isn't a mere anthology of fairy tales. It's a profound meditation on the power of art to heal trauma, on the victory of intelligence over brute force, and on how a single brave voice can redeem a broken world. Scheherazade didn't use a sword, an army, or a decree. She used the most human weapon of all, the narrative. And with it, she left us a legacy that still resonates today, reminding us that the best way to combat darkness is, and always will be, to tell a better story. Next time you find yourself trapped in a single narrative, in a pessimistic view of the world or yourselves, remember Scheherazade. Perhaps you just need a new and different story to find your way out. The power lies in the words you choose. Her strategy is a reminder that the most effective persuasion isn't the one that shouts, but the one that whispers, the one that doesn't impose but invites, the one that doesn't give orders but opens the imagination to new possibilities. It's the art of subtle influence. Scheherazada's success depended on her profound understanding of her audience, which in this case was a single person. She adapted her stories, her tone, and her rhythm to the king's psychological needs. It's a masterclass in empathetic and strategic communication. Scheherazada's stories are a tapestry of human experience. There's joy, sorrow, greed, generosity, betrayal, and loyalty. By presenting the king with the full spectrum of humanity, she pulls him out of his absolutist view and teaches him the complexity and nuances of the world. The story shows us that curiosity is a more powerful instinct than hatred. Scheherazade gambled her life on this idea and won. She made the king's desire to know what happened next stronger than his desire for revenge, a triumph of the mind over base instinct. The real miracle isn't the magic of the tales, but the psychological transformation they provoke. The true magic carpet is the one that transports the king from his personal hell to a state of grace and wisdom, all through the power of imagination. So the next time you hear the name Scheherazade, don't just think of exotic tales and Arabian Nights. Think of one of history's most brilliant minds, a woman who proved that stories aren't an escape from reality, but the most powerful tool to change it. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of narrative, and for discovering the secret weapon of 1001 Nights with me. It's been an honor to explore this treasure of universal literature with all of you. If you were fascinated by this secret and want to uncover more hidden mysteries in literary history, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And tell me in the comments, what story has changed your view of the world? I'll be reading carefully.